Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at BlastThink and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast.
This episode was brought to you by BlastThink. We are proud to be the first and only communication, marketing, and advertising agency specially focused on blasting solutions, explosives engineering, and the global mining industry. Our expertise extends from Portugal to a global scale, and we are proficient in developing marketing strategies in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. At BlastThink, we are not afraid to be bold. It's our ambition to take your brand to the next level. So visit our portfolio at blastthink.com and let's start an explosion together.
So through that time, and like I said again, it really was enjoyable seeing such a diverse use of explosives. In fact, Ensign Bickford, as they started out, was a small company, and I covered Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, New York. All these territories, because, like I said again, we were a small company and covered a large area, and so it was actually kind of a neat application, and again, so then I got promoted to regional manager out in the Midwest, back into Evansville, and covered the 11 states in the Midwest. And again, wow, how enjoyable that was to go to the Lead Belt in Missouri, go to Texas, go to the iron ore up in Marietta, went to what they call Copper Range.
Yep, the Copper Range.
Because Copper Range was an underground copper mine. And to go underground in that copper mine and work with those guys, and
but I mean, for a near miss such as that, and to keep that molten, you still have that.
Yes, I do.
Definitely, that's not one that I think everyone has one of those little tokens of a near miss or of a learning experience that they have, and yeah, it's interesting that you brought that to with you for the rest of your career, and you've been in the business for so long. I mean, you probably have story after story of either near miss and we could do a whole episode almost on those, huh?
We're so lucky because I got into the non-electric, and unfortunately, guys, back in the 70s, 80s. About four guys a year were killed with premature electric caps, and it used to aggravate me. Whenever I would go out trying to promote non-electrics, and the electric cap manufacturers saying that's a bunch of bull. They're not. In fact, that non-electric's a lot more dangerous than electric caps, because you can check the electric caps with a galvanometer. You can't check that damn non-L, and yet then you hear another guy gets killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Stockdale Means calling me up and saying, okay, we're shooting underneath this power line. Do you think we ought to use non-electrics here? And I said, I would. And they said, well, we talked to the DuPont guy, and he said there's no danger there. I said, isn't that sad? I said, is that SOB going to be out there loading that shot? I don't guess so. Oh, no. He's sitting back in the corporate office telling you that there's no danger to use an electric cap under a power line, but you shouldn't use non-electric. And they said, well, okay, could you come up here and could you bring us some non-electrics to shoot this shot? Well, I did. Now, okay, that's what I say, the Wild West. Mm-hmm. So I go to C&K Coal and I say, hey guys, can I borrow a couple cases of shock tube, not detonator? Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, put it in the magazine and get them out. I mean, that's That's how kind of loose it was.
It used to be, yeah.
Yeah. So I put them in the back seat of my Monte Carlo car and drove down to the shot, and we loaded that shot with, now what we were doing then was putting detonating cord down the hole and then surface delays is how we were shooting it. And so we did. We hooked it all up, shot it, everything went fine, and Stockdale and Means started using non-L.
No. I've heard of, I think it was Chris Grabner was telling me a story of a guy's using electric detonators. He was using non-electrics on the pattern, but he was using an electric detonator for the initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And the power line was actually pretty far away from the shot, but it was close to the operator who was firing. And so when he shot the shot, the heave had whipped the cord into the sky, and it had gone up far enough to either touch or arc over from the power line itself. So it was further enough away from the actual shot, but then it whipped around and the power came all the way right down into his hands where he was holding the blasting machine and killed him.
And that happened. You're right, Evan. That is a true story and happened more than once, where the lead-in lines got thrown up into the power lines and then electrocuted the blaster, who was still had his hands on the machine. I know one other one working in 𝗲𝗶𝗀𝗀, Oklahoma. And one of the problems was back at the time was you all knew you should not be out on that shot with electric caps during electric storm. But it was like, let's hurry up and get this over with. Now, we know now that a lot of times the lightning is actually in front of the storm. So before it even starts raining, that's when the electricity, and we're not talking about getting hit with a bolt of lightning. All you have to do is energize the atmosphere enough, it'll energize it. And so, we would tell that story. And of course, the electric cap manufacturer would say, oh, they're just trying to scare you. That's a bunch of bull. You don't need to talk that. And I would think, God, that's so sad that you would put someone's life in jeopardy
risk,
so you can continue to get that. And so in 𝗲𝗶𝗀𝗀, it was trying to think the name of the powder company, and they were out loading the shot. Same thing. Now I was up at a lot of times in my early days when I was doing this, I'd go out and help guys load an electric shot, and in the afternoon we'd shoot a non-electric shot. So I was out actually on the shot. I was up at Cootie Brothers, they call it, and you could see that storm coming in. And I was saying, guys, I don't think we need this. It was on electric shot. I don't think we should stay here. And they're like, oh, hurry up, we'll get it, Devil. I said, no, I'm done. I'm out of here. I am out of here. And I walked off the shot. And of course, they called me all kinds of names and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
As they continued to hook it up. And they got it, and they got it off. Okay, so they felt that validated what they had been doing. And I was like, no, that doesn't validate. You guys took a risk you shouldn't have done, of trying to hurry up and load that shot. And that happened all the time. And the guys at 𝗲𝗶𝗀𝗀 didn't make it. It lit up and killed 2 guys. The shot went off ahead of time. And
yeah, all those rules, like Paul Sturck says, they're written in blood. All those rules that we have in the MSHA handbooks and blasting handbooks.
I don't know, the old knock on wood thing. I don't know when the last time it was that there was a premature shot that anybody got killed.
Mm-hmm.
It really goes back 20, 30 years. Again, way to go, powder industry, because you've moved on to a safer blasting program, and it didn't happen. And we went through the new products and things. So one of the other was digging into misfires,
Mm-hmm.
And there had been people who've been killed from that standpoint. The challenge with the electric caps was when you break the wire, you broke the shunt, and now it's just 2 antennas sticking out there. So you energize it enough, it'll go off. So
a friend of mine was just on a beach in Panama City or somewhere down in Florida, I think maybe Destin or something, for the holidays, and their family was sitting there, and someone looks over at him. He's got long hair, dirty hippie, whatever, and it's sticking up like as if he's in a science lab. And they're sitting on the beach, and they're like, whoa, that's so cool, how's that happening? And he's not a blaster or anything. He's like, I think this is not a good thing, so he looks on his phone real quick, and luckily he does, just out of curiosity. And it's like, what happens when your hair stands up? And it's Google says, seek shelter immediately. You're about to be the one who's struck by lightning. Wow. Because the air is that ionized. And you guys are like a target. So they just left their stuff on the beach and ran inside into some hotel or something to try to get out of because it's they were pretty far away, but it travels through the air, especially if it's humid.
The electric caps weren't good with Mother Nature. Mother Nature was not good at that. Now then, of course, what happened whenever Atlas Powder Company and now DuPont sold out to ETI, but Austin Powder, they all started making their own non-electrics. But once they had their own non-electrics, they no longer had to defend the electric cap usage. And of course, it went way down, and now Dyno Nobel's shut down their electric cap plant up in New York. And it's a product of the past. Now we're evolved on to electronic detonators, which is even better than anything we've had, in the past. But again, it's been a great experience in the 50 years that I've been in the powder industry, seeing how it's improved. And of course, now it's so enjoyable watching things like smart drills, drones, shot designs, things of that nature. And going back in my early days, whenever I didn't even know what I was doing, didn't know why I was doing it. They just told me to do it, and I did it. And of course, today, now we go in and we design shots and have better powder distribution, better control of the shots, and it's just wonderful.
Next level.
Seeing what it is, and as I am now ending at the end of my career, I can look back over that 50 years and say, wow, is it so much better today than it once was? And like I said,
I have heard a story that you share, and it's kind of about communication, and I think communication is definitely part of a safety share. And it was really cool about some terminology that we use in the blasting industry, and why some things are called other things, and why there's nicknames for something, and why something would be universal. You have people call something a chub. You have someone call something a non-L instead of a non-electric, and that's a trade name, but people only knew that name, so they call all non-electric detonators non-Ls or something, because that's the first thing they learn. Or one of the reason I bring the question up is because you talk about the back underground and the face. So you want to tell some of that stories?
Interesting. The mining industry, which I'm very proud of, my God, the mining industry has been a key to civilization since the beginning of man. Neanderthal man scarfed around and picked up a sharp rock, and the sharp rock led him to cut something or make a tool, out of that. And the Romans were mining copper in Spain, like 2,000 years ago. And so when we came to the United States, the good news was there's tremendous amount of reserves and minerals here. Now, one of the challenges we had in this country was all these immigrants came in to the United States, and they were from Poland, Spain, Italy, France, England. Well, one of the challenges was they all spoke different languages. So you go in an underground mine, and of course they didn't have big surface mines back then. They had no equipment to excavate, so they all went underground. So
chasing the veins specifically.
A lot of different people under there. And so it's like, okay, time out. We got to make sure we're all on the same page here. So if you laid down in an underground mine, what we look as the roof or the top, we'd call it the back. Okay, so then you take your face, it's a single syllable word, and that's what we're going to work at. They call that the face. Then you look to your body parts called the ribs, which is the side. So we're going to call these the ribs. So you got, and then down at the bottom of the face is the toe. Well, you look at your foot, that's the toe. So, okay, no matter whether you're speaking French or Polish or Czechoslovakian or whatever, but here's the face, there's in the mind. You got the face, you got the ribs, you got the back, you got the toe. And then what's cool is, as you go in 200 years forward in a mining class in Rolla, Missouri, and in the book it says, when you're at the face or when you're working at the toe, you know, and they're using those same words all these years later. And of course, the mining industry, as you said, Evan, if we all agree to call this a name, then that's what the name is. And someone could come along later and say, that's not what it is. Well, we all agreed that's what we're going to call it, so that's what it's called.
And that's so cool, you know. Some mines had a Polish section where just the Polish would operate, right?
Yes. Yes.
To be able to come with something, a single syllable word, to improve communication, and I think that's pretty crucial. You know, I share a safety share that's kind of goofy and funny, where I felt like an idiot, but we were driving from one pit office to another pit office, and it was someone's birthday, and so we were in a truck and we were just traveling down, and we had a bunch of leftover birthday cake that was from one of the person's parties, and we just felt like, well, why don't we bring this birthday cake for the other side of the office at the other pit, you know. And they had felt bad that they missed it. So okay, so I'm sitting there, I'm an intern, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and we kind of leave the road, and we're going to go check on a few things before we go to that office so we can report on some stuff. And there is a parking ditch in a pull-off, and you know, the parking ditch, in order to be able to set the brake and so that vehicles don't roll, it's a very large parking ditch for haul trucks, not some small haul trucks either.
Okay.
And so the operator of the pickup truck that I'm at, he's looking at other things, and he's looking at traffic to see if we're safe in the pickup truck. So he's around looking at all of it, and I've got this birthday cake in my hands, and I'm telling him, heads up, you know, heads up, you know, and I'm looking at him trying to tell him, like, heads up, like, look ahead, you're about to drive into a parking ditch, but I'm just saying, heads up, heads up, heads up. And so he's looking in all his mirrors, he's thinking that there's a big haul truck in the way, and that we're just going straight into this parking ditch. So I'm like, heads up, heads up, heads up. Boom! This whole truck just into this parking ditch, and there is green icing all over the roof and the dash of this pickup truck. And I was like, what the hell? You know, I told him, I was like, I said heads up. He's like, heads up, you know. So I learned at that moment very clearly, you know, to try to articulate the safety issue at that point, you know. And now I look like an idiot because I was covered in green icing as I'm walking into the office, and now no one has any birthday cake anymore, and I got to clean the survey truck. But
you're bringing up a great point, Evan, because you can, in each geographic area or each mining section, they can have unique terms and whatever. And never do you want to not ask, what did you just say? And you ask for it to be, could you tell me what that was?
Yes.
I was over in India, and we were talking about what kind of explosives they're going to use. They said, we're going to use Bono gel. And I said, well, what's Bono gel? Now, myself, having enough years and experience, I never heard this before, you know, so there was no embarrassment to say, what are you talking about? And of course, when they took me to the magazine to show it to me, it was C4. You know, it was a military explosive that somebody had said Bono gel would be Bono good gel, I guess. And, but that wasn't an official name. You know, just somebody called it, you know. And of course, if you get some different foreign languages, you know, they can call something by a foreign phrase, you know, to it. But back again to your point, Evan, is that absolutely in a communication standpoint, what did you say? Can you explain this to me again? Because I don't understand. Don't hesitate to ask for clarification.
Yes.
Of what you're either wanting me to do or what you're wanting me to use.
And especially ask that quickly, because sometimes that communication is meant to be urgent. So if you don't hear it clearly, you can, not every situation is one to sit there and ponder over the night and say, I wonder what that person said, because that person was probably trying to tell you something that might protect all of your fingers at that exact moment or something like that, I mean, it could be life and death.
Yeah, when I first started in the industry, there were 12 major manufacturers of explosives. Well, now we're down to like 3 or 4, and when you had the whole array of those, they all had different terminologies for their unique products, and so as you go out here in the industry, you could come across a number of different products, and they're called do's and don'ts, that nobody ever reads. But in the case, it says do's and don'ts. If you got a product like, wait a minute, I don't think I've used this before, you ought to read about what you can and can't do, or what the limitations are, of that product, before you go out here and try to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in one of the master's classes that we had. It was an instrumentation class, and this was taught by Dr. Johnson at Missouri Science and Technology, and a lot of military people are getting this advanced degree through the university. And we had a big group of people who were from different branches of the military, and one gentleman was the #1 guy in the U.S. Army for kicking down doors. He was the breacher, like the lead breacher. And, if you're the lead breacher for the U.S. Army, you're pretty much the one who can kick down the biggest door in the plant. You know what I mean? There's not anyone bigger and better at doing their job than us, I would say. And so we're in this class and we're talking about 25-500 dual delays in a high-speed photography class. And he raises his hand and he's like, what is a 25-500? And they're like, it's a dual delay detonator. And he's like, what is a dual delay detonator? And they're like, well, it has a delay on the surface and in the hole. And he raises his hand, what is a surface delay and what is an in-hole, a in-hole delay? And so that there's a delay. And he's like, a delay in what? He just keeps raising a hand, and everyone's kind of looking at him like it's common knowledge, but they're like a delay in the time that it initiates, 25 milliseconds after you've initiated. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he had to kind of clarify. I think he might have felt people looking at him, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, but for some reason, that's right. And asking so many questions in a row, which some people would consider as a stupid question, they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And it's because he stands 6 feet next to that door. And when he says execute, 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 there is a 0 delay from when he pulls that trigger, right? So he's got that button. He's never in his entire career of like 40 plus years of being in the U.S. military, never used a delay detonator, because they don't have time for a delay. Yeah. They're instants,
Instantaneous, yeah.
So it's very unique to hear that. And eye-opening for me is that there is always another application for explosives. Always. And anywhere you go, there's someone else is using another application of explosives that you don't know. And you got to be willing to ask that stupid question or ask that question. Yes. To get that level of communication.
Yes. Yes. Clarify. Right. Yep.
It's unique to hear those kinds of situations, and I don't know how far back it goes in the mining industry when it comes to toes and backs and ribs, and what other types of, do you know any other slang or terms that you've heard throughout the years that you thought were quite interesting?
Well, what's interesting too on this though, Evan, is if you lived it, you didn't know it was different. You know, in other words,
True,
you came into it in the begin with, and you used a phrase, you know, about a haul road, you know, and someone might say, what's a haul road? Well, where you haul stuff down the road, you know, but a haul road's been a phrase that's been used since, you know, the beginning of time. You know, of course, you talk about a high wall, and they're like, well, what makes it a high wall? Well, it's a wall and it's high, you know, so it's a high wall, you know. And so what's a spoil? Well, the spoil is where you put the material that you broke and, you know, muck it out. What are you doing to it? We're mucking it out. Well, how do you muck it out? Well, you dig it out, but you call it a muck pile. Well, what's a muck pile? Well, it's where you take in the material and you put it in a pile, and it's called a muck pile. I mean, but again, the phrase being is like, go down to the muck pile and take a left-hand turn. Well, where's the muck pile? I take a left-hand turn at, you know? So there is geological areas around the mine that we like, you know, just take for granted that a person ought to understand, you know, what those
terminologies are, and it's a whole vocabulary. I've been learning to sail recently, and half of that is not just the action of sailing, it's the vocabulary of this global and historic sport and pastime where every single item has its own line and its own sheet, and the spinnaker halyard and the jib halyard. And it's similar to blasting, where you know, you get into the nuts and bolts of it. There's terminologies that are completely needed to be learned, regardless of what language you're speaking or location, more along location.
Yeah, well, you use the word a starter. What do you mean? Well, I'm going to use this to start the shot, called a starter, or a firing iron. Someone will call it a firing iron, you know.
That's one I haven't heard it.
Firing iron?
A firing iron.
Yeah, firing iron. Yeah, iron, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, you're taking a device that you're putting a shotgun shell primer in, and then whenever you either twist it or you snap it, it hits that, and then a flame and a energy goes through the shock tube and shuts the shock tube off, and then it fires, you know. And you know, so like I said, that, you know, someone says, go get me the starter. You know, the starter of what? Well, I'm meaning the start the shot with, you know. I got a starter. And so
have you heard of some past situations where you've seen people get in trouble by not asking that question?
Well,
or if someone told them to do something and they kind of just assumed that they understood what was going on, do you have anything that comes to mind in one of those situations?
Well, I would think that, and to good point you bring up is that you take it for granted. Okay, for instance, you're going to put off a blast, you know, and you may have a new person, a rookie or whatever out there, and you would think they would know they should look for cover. They should have cover. And I can remember a story having a brand new guy out there in the field, coming into the industry, and so inside Bickford, you had to have a college degree to go to work for Ensign Bickford. Well, that was new. Okay, so at that time, they weren't hiring experienced blasters or people in the mining industry. They'd go out and hire a guy with a finance degree and make him a field rep. You know, so you're really talking about not any knowledge at all. So anyway, we go out to put off a shot, and of course we're all here, and we're going to put the shot off, and so put the shot off, and it rises up, and he takes off running. And my first thing is, please stop! What? run, because at some point in time, you don't want to run back. Just keep on running and hope you outrun where the fly rock's coming down. Now, we were all going to get under the powder trucks and whatever, but I realized that I had failed to say to him, if the shot rises up, crawl underneath this truck.
Yes.
It was thought to be understood that you're going to put a shot off. Now, again, back in the day, we probably should have done it. We were right there on top of the shot, maybe 100 feet, 200 feet off the shot, And now, once upon a time in the mines, we run 1,000 feet of det cord out and shoot the det cord, Well, of course, the Ensign Bickford had to love that, that every shot, shot was 1,000 feet.
I've been on some shots like that too, yeah.
1,000 feet of det cord. And we learned the hard way. Again, I'm thinking back to our ignorance days, and we ran the det cord out. And what you did is you had your pump down in the pit, and you had a rubber hose that went up over the high wall. Then once you got up over the high wall, you plugged it into a aluminum pipe, and then the aluminum pipe ran it on out to a roadside ditch. Now later on, the government said, you can't do that. The water's going to be pumped into a sediment pond. You can't dump your pit water right into the ditch, but we did at the time. So we ran the shock tube out, and ran the detonating cord out. Ready, everybody ready. Boom, put the shot off. And then all of a sudden, on this pipe, aluminum pipe, this big spray comes up. You're like,
new mine sprinkler system.
Yeah, so you went down there, and there's this big V in the aluminum pipe. You're like, who in the hell did this? We did it. We ran that detonating cord.
Right over.
You think, look back on it now and say, how dumb we had to be to not realize that detonating cord is going to, and of course they told the old story, you can wrap around a tree and we cut a tree down and whatever. But, our mindset, we were just using it to shoot into the shot. We didn't look at it as having, detonation.
Yes, the power of one strand.
But, learn the hard way. You don't run detonating cord over the top of your aluminum pipe and then shoot it, because it's going to cut that aluminum pipe in two.
I had a client of mine, they called me in. They thought there was an issue with the detonator, the det cord, and they were doing the same thing. They were using a single strand of det cord as an initiator and then they were V'ing it off as the safety line to go around. But instead of just using a shock tube and then using shock tube to initiate the det cord and making the dual path of initiation, they used just one really long line of det cord. And they kept showing me these videos from the security cameras. Look at all that white smoke that's coming off of it. That's real new. We're not used to seeing a bunch of white smoke. So when it would initiate, but in the summertime, there was just water all over the mine, or snow melt, all over the mine. So it was vaporizing the water that was sitting on the ground that it was going over. So they're sitting there thinking that this is coming from, the det cord itself, but really it's all just this big cloud of mist that's coming up from the steam of vaporizing all this. And so that's what they're complaining about,
Well, one of the challenges we had in early going with the detonating cord shoots at 24,000 feet per second, and shock tube travels at 6,000 feet per second. So that means there's a mismatch of 4 to 1. It'll shoot 4 times as fast as shock tube. So when you had detonating cord down the hole, and you come and you clip your J hook onto it, and you put your surface delay onto it, and they may have 2 or 3 feet of excess cord, and they wouldn't cut it off. Well, whenever the detonator hit the detonating cord would go away the detonating cord would go away, at 4 times the speed, and it would could cut the shock tube off before it had a chance to get out,
to go up,
away from to go to the next hole. The other thing we found out is you can take shock tube and put it in a vise and crank it down tight and shoot it, and it will not shoot through that vise. In other words, you can smash it down so tight. So what I found out is detonating cord Well, so you have your shock tube in the stemming, and the shock tube runs over the top of the stemming, and the shock tube can actually come down and smash that shock tube flat, and it won't fire.
The det cord can smash
cord, yeah,
can smash that stemming into and compress that that non-electric shock tube.
And of course, what would happen is if you had a misfire, and as you did in your lecture on misfires, the first thing everybody does is starts pointing fingers at each other instead of trying to investigate it and try to find out, what it.
The root cause was.
The root cause of it is just like, it's your fault, your fault, your fault. On it.
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, when it comes to like learning about the different products and naming it and how they operate, I think I was working for a powder company for quite a few years before someone finally corrected me and said, you got to stop calling it non-L. It's non-electric, and I was like, oh, whoops, and they're like, that's our competitor's product.
Yeah, it's like Coca-Cola, and give me a Coke, give me a soft drink.
Yes, give me a Pepsi.
Instead of Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there a situation, do you have another version of a situation where someone was kind of not properly using the communication or asking the questions that they should have, that you can think of? I mean, you said you had lots of stories in the coal mines back in the day of like that, something about the Jimmy that you used to drive, the Scout or something like that, in a fly rock incident. Did you have?
Well, I mean, the idea of interesting enough, we was telling our stories. That my second week as a drill blast foreman, so I'm the man in charge with zero experience, and I pulled up alongside the drill. We're going to shoot the shot, and I've seen now about 4 shots in my life. And the blaster said, "You need to move your vehicle." And I said, "No, I'm okay." And he, of course, now there's a relationship between the company men and the union men. In other words, I'm only going to tell you one time, and use a little profanity, move your damn truck. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. Now, the lesson to be learned here is when the blaster says move your truck, move your truck. Well, I didn't. Well, the shot goes off, rock comes down, smashes through my hood of my truck. So now I have to drive into the shop and tell the assistant superintendent that your new drill blast foreman just got his truck shot up, And again, the communication standpoint is that, and it used to be kind of a joke, you never want to be closer to the shot than the blaster. If the blaster moves back, make sure it be on him, because he just loaded that shot.
That's very true. That is very true.
Yeah. So you don't want to. Now, what was really crazy back in that day, in the 70s, we shot 24 hours a day. So 3 o'clock in the morning, we're putting shots on. Now, you talk about tough on fly rock. You have no idea. You can't see it.
Wow.
So you shoot it assuming it's going to fly. And, of course, back in those wild days, it was load her high and let her fly kind of a mindset. And so you shot it, and then you crawled under stuff and listened. And you hear the pop, 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 the stuff was falling around you. Then what would really scare you is you start to crawl out underneath your cover, and then something would hit. And there was one that went really high and took a longer time to come down. Now they stopped that and said you couldn't shoot past sundown.
Wow.
In the early days, we shot around the clock, and it was terrible because you really couldn't see it coming.
And your trucks were very much the shelters, so you kind of had to be a skinny blaster because you had to squeeze under your truck. You couldn't be you couldn't.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, and then we also learned that you picked a spot out, because I have done this before. You got 4 or 5 people standing around, and everybody decides they're going to that in front of the duels on the powder truck, and now you got 2 or 3 guys crawling over the top of each other trying to dig under there to get down or get so it's like, this is my spot. You guys got this? I'm going here. you're going there. Let's make sure we all know where we're going, before we put this shot off, so we're clear.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, like you said, times have changed, absolutely.
Yeah. And like I say, again, we're out in the coal mine. Coal mines were really, and then we got into the cast blasting, they called it, where you're going to try to move it all across the pit. And of course, your powder factors came up, and the shot was more reactive because you're trying now to take these 4 rows of material and move them 150 feet across the pit into the spoil. And of course, fly rock was not thought to be a bad thing.
That's what you were trying to do.
Yeah,
that was the real loader high and let her fly.
Control. He was trying to make sure that the fly rock was flying in the right direction, to do it. And but yeah, I mean, I look back on our days in the 70s and say, wow, how lucky we were that there wasn't more damage done and more people did not get hurt.
How damaged was your ego on that second week when you had to go get a new truck?
Yeah, it was so insulting. You would have to go in basically head hanging down and say, hey, Bob Hart was his name, and say, Bob, I got a problem. He said, yeah, what's your problem? I said, I just shot my truck, and of course, he like, oh my God, and it wasn't major damage. It got fixed. Lesson learned.
But it's really, there's plenty. It's not like fly rock is only an issue of the 70s. It's
absolutely
all
not.
Those lessons,
absolutely
and
not.
you can kind of giggle about it nowadays. Of what it was like arguing over who gets the spot under the truck and things like that. And those are old stories and whatnot. But it's still so very fresh.
No, and you're exactly right, Evan, because, I mean, one of the last major fly rock incidents that I wasn't there but knew about was where they were going to shoot the toe again, and they put an angle hole in there, and the blaster was supposed to only load the toe. Well, somebody forgot to tell the blaster, so he loaded that entire angle hole. Well, the high wall dipped down as it went out on the toe, so they only had say 3 foot of burden.
Oh.
And when it blew out, it threw rock over 3,000 feet away. Now, the good news, it did damage. Nobody got hurt. The good news was it was in a remote quarry. God, if that had happened in some of these quarries there's subdivisions and all the way around these quarries. The one down there in 𝘁𝗵𝗶𝘀, and it has a shopping mall on one side, an airport on one side, and a college on one side, and they're still mining in there. And they cannot tolerate more than 500 feet of fly rock. If they had something like that to happen, it'd be shut down for sure, but it would be
someone would be hurt.
Yeah. And but again, back to your communication story, is that hole number 12 should not have been loaded. Should have only been the hole. Now, who didn't tell who to do what?
Mm-hmm.
Where was that mistake made? The design was saying load like 100 pounds in the bottom of that hole number 12 to pop out that toe.
Right. They just got in their zone, and they were just, here's a collar,
every hole,
Yeah. And that's where taping the hole or putting a marker, having a different kind of spray paint or something to wait, why is this one orange spray paint and the other ones are green or something, some sort of communication, It's just big difference. But well, thank you again, Mick. I really appreciate you coming on, and it's always been very helpful for me in many aspects, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at BlastThink for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.